how does an economy as vast, as incredibly diverse, and, well, as complex as India navigate the intricate currents of global trade?
That's a huge question.
Right. And how does a country with immense internal pressures, from a huge population to regional imbalances, attract that crucial international investment while also trying to build up its own domestic industries?
Yeah, it's definitely not just a simple balancing act. I mean, it's more like a multidimensional strategic challenge.
Yeah.
You really can't just apply a textbook economic model, one designed for maybe a small, homogeneous country, to somewhere like India. It needs something tailored.
Exactly. A uniquely tailored approach. And that's precisely what we're diving into today. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission in this deep dive is to take the source material you've shared with us, cut through some of the noise, and really extract the vital insights. We're focusing specifically on understanding India's economic strategies since those pivotal 1991 reforms.
Right, a real turning point.
And exploring the philosophies behind promoting exports, and then really getting into the nuts and bolts of that ambitious Make in India initiative.
And we'll be using your document as our main guide here, looking at the thinking behind these big policy shifts, detailing the key initiatives, and, importantly, seeing what progress was reported within the time frame the material covers.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our source takes us back to 1991. A really significant moment in India's modern economic history. This wasn't just, tinkering around the edges, was it?
Oh, far from it. The 91 reforms were truly a landmark. But the source makes a crucial point. It wasn't this sudden, abrupt, big bang opening.
Ah, okay.
It's described more as a gradual and calibrated opening of the economy. So yes, liberalizing inflows of goods, services, capital, allowing more integration with the world. But critically, right from the start, there was a very clear, very distinct push towards promoting exports.
And the source clarifies this wasn't just about, say, exporting whatever surplus India might have had lying around at the time. The focus shifted. It became about specifically tailoring products, services to cater to global demand, understanding international tastes, meeting global preferences. That feels like more than just a policy change. It's almost a fundamental shift in economic thinking for certain sectors.
It absolutely is. And when you think about how an economy engages globally and pushes exports, the source introduces two sort of classic theoretical strategies. You've got export-led growth and then growth-led exports.
Okay, two distinct paths. They sound a bit similar maybe at first glance. Let's start with export-led growth.
Yeah.
Where did that idea really gain traction?
So the source pins this one as having a more recent origin, really coming into vogue in the 1990s. It was heavily influenced by the experience of those Southeast Asian economies.
Ah, the Asian tigers.
Precisely. The ones famously dubbed the Asian tigers, countries like Thailand, Malaysia, South Korea, Indonesia.
Their economic stories were, well, legendary for a while there, weren't they?
Just phenomenal growth narratives. The source notes how they managed this accelerated economic growth, rapid jumps in per capita income, broad-based development, all in a remarkably short space of time.
And what was their core strategy?
It involved a high degree of openness to the global economy, really liberal policies towards foreign investment, and this strong, almost singular focus on building up their export sectors.
Right.
The source uses quite a vivid analogy, actually, calling them butterfly economies.
Butterfly economies. What's the idea there?
It suggests their ability, as relatively smaller economies, to achieve this swift, transformative income growth, like a caterpillar into a butterfly, but for an economy.
That captures, well, rapid transformation. But wasn't there a catch? Didn't that trajectory hit a wall?
It did. The source points out that the viability of this, let's say, pure export-led approach was seriously questioned by the Asian financial crisis that swept through those very economies in the late 90s.
Yeah, I remember that. It spread fast.
It's like a contagion effect,
Yeah.
as the source puts it. It triggered a severe currency crisis where international confidence in their local currencies just eroded dramatically.
So after that crisis, was the conclusion that the strategy itself was flawed? Or maybe that the openness was the problem?
Well, the source is quite careful here. It says that at the time covered, it may be premature to say whether openness or the strategy was flawed. It suggests the crisis wasn't necessarily because of the openness or the export-led strategy per se,
Okay.
but maybe attributable to other factors. Now, the source doesn't actually detail what those other factors might be in this material, so we should stick to that point. The crisis raised big questions, but the source doesn't condemn the strategy outright based solely on the openness aspect.
Okay, fair enough. So sticking with the source, for an economy to really go down that export-led growth path, What does it fundamentally require?
Based on the document, it needs a pretty significant reorientation of the whole domestic economic sector. It has to be primarily geared towards producing for export markets.
Right.
It also means allowing liberal foreign investment and, at a national level, actively, vigorously promoting exports.
And this is where the source then pivots back to India, arguing that maybe this pure export-led strategy isn't the perfect fit, or at least not the only strategy suitable for India's unique situation. Why is that?
Yeah, the source draws a very clear contrast. It contrasts India with those relatively smaller, more homogeneous Asian tigers. It argues that export-led growth is, well, more feasible for economies that are less complex.
Simpler structures.
Right. Less population pressure, fewer entrenched regional imbalances, less structural rigidity, economies with more inherent flexibility to transform quickly. India, on the other hand, is just a fundamentally different picture.
How so?
Immense size, obviously.
Yeah.
A huge agrarian base that still employs a vast number of people, incredible internal diversity, languages, cultures, economic levels, intense population pressure leading to big challenges like unemployment, poverty, significant regional disparities in development, and then various structural rigidities, inflexibilities built into the economy and society over decades.
So given all that complexity,
Given all that, the source concludes that relying solely on a pure export-led growth model would be, and I quote, neither appropriate nor desirable for India. It's just too large, too complex, too diverse for that kind of one-size-fits-all approach.
that makes a lot of intuitive sense. What works for, say, Singapore might not scale to the Indian subcontinent. Okay, so that brings us neatly to the second strategy mentioned, growth-led exports.
Yes, and this strategy is presented as being much more relevant, potentially more suitable for economies structured like India's. It's also described as the historical path that many of the now developed countries followed during their own industrialization phases.
Interesting. So it's not a new idea.
Not at all. But unlike that potentially rapid butterfly-like growth of the export-led model, this one is characterized as being slow, time-consuming, but sustainable in the long run.
Okay, slow and steady. How does this growth-led exports mechanism actually work, according to the source?
The core idea here is that your economic growth is driven initially by the expansion and, crucially, the maturity of your domestic manufacturing sector.
Building strength at home first.
Exactly. As industries grow, they become more efficient, more competitive, more capable within the home market. Then, naturally, they reach a point where they can effectively compete in global markets. And this organic progression then leads to an increase in merchandise exports.
So you build domestic capability, competitiveness first, and the exports follow as a sort of natural consequence of that strength.
Precisely. The source describes it as providing an incentive mechanism for the natural growth of export-oriented industries well integrated with the domestic economy. It's less about forcing industries to be export-only from day one and more about supporting overall industrial development, which then finds its own international opportunities.
Okay, so given the arguments against a pure export-led model for India, did India just adopt this growth-led strategy wholesale then?
Well, this is where the strategic insight from the source gets really interesting. It says that neither India nor China, given their scale and complexity, chose one or the other exclusively.
Not an either situation.
Exactly. Instead, both countries have actually blended both strategies as part of their approach to globalization.
A blend. How does that work in practice? How do you blend those two seemingly different approaches?
The source describes it like this. You have dedicated, specific geographical areas within the domestic economy, think special economic zones, perhaps that are exclusively focused on production for export.
Okay, like little export islands.
Sort of, yeah. These areas operate almost like mini export-led economies. They get targeted incentives, dedicated infrastructure, really aligning with that export-led growth model. However, the rest of the economy, the much larger domestic economy, continues primarily along the path of the growth-led export strategy,
I see.
focusing on building broader industrial capability, strengthening the domestic market first.
Okay. So you get these highly focused, internationally oriented zones designed for rapid export manufacturing, almost like controlled experiments in export-led growth, while the vast majority of the economy builds strength more organically from the inside out. That feels like a very pragmatic way to try and get the benefits of both models while maybe mitigating the risks of applying one pure strategy to the entire massive domestic economy.
That's exactly the picture the source paints. It's a recognition that for economies of this sheer scale and complexity, a layered, maybe a differentiated approach is necessary.
Makes sense.
And the core takeaway the source pulls from this whole discussion of strategies isn't really about which model is theoretically better. It's the conclusion that, looking ahead, economies simply must embrace a distinct openness to the global economy. Exports have to be seen as absolutely integral to future growth. It's not an optional add-on anymore.
So regardless of the specific mix of strategies, participating actively strategically in global trade through exports is seen as basically non-negotiable for future prosperity.
That's the clear message.
Yeah.
And this strategic understanding, this context, provides the essential backdrop for these major national initiatives like Make in India. That initiative is all about how India is actively positioning itself within this global trade and manufacturing landscape.
Make in India. It's become such a widely recognized phrase, hasn't it? Almost a global brand for India's economic ambitions.
It is. It's very much a deliberate and significant branding exercise for India on the global stage. Mirroring similar efforts by other developing economies trying to attract investment and manufacturing activity. The initiative itself was formally launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi back on September 25, 2014.
And what was the central driving goal behind it? What was it aiming for?
The primary goal is really ambitious, to transform India into a global manufacturing hub.
A hub.
Yeah, and the strategy to get there involves actively encouraging both multinational companies and domestic Indian companies to establish and expand their manufacturing operations within India's borders.
And which part of the government is primarily leading this charge?
It's spearheaded by the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, DIPP. And right from the launch, it came with a very specific and frankly quite aggressive target.
Which was?
To significantly raise the contribution of the manufacturing sector to India's total GDP. The target number was 25% of GDP.
25%. Wow.
Now, interestingly, the source actually mentions two different target years for hitting that 25% figure. It lists 2025 in one place and later mentions 2020 for the same target.
A slight discrepancy there in the source material.
A slight one, yes. But the direction and the sheer scale of the intended increase are very clear. At the time the initiative launched, manufacturing's contribution was hovering around, I think, 16%. So jumping to 25% represented a really significant leap.
Yeah, nearly a 10 percentage point increase in a relatively short time frame. That's definitely ambitious. What sort of actions, what policies fall under this Make in India umbrella to try and make that happen?
The source highlights that Make in India launched a whole array of new initiatives. Key among these are actively promoting foreign direct investment, FDI, implementing significant reforms related to intellectual property rights, IPR, which we should definitely spend some time on, because it's crucial, and generally just fostering an environment that's conducive to the growth and development of the manufacturing sector.
Okay, so it sounds like a pretty broad spectrum of efforts. Are there specific areas, specific industries that Make in India is particularly focused on attracting or boosting?
Yes, definitely. The initiative didn't just cast a wide net, it specifically targets 25 key sectors of the economy.
25.
And the list is quite diverse, which reflects the breadth of India's economic potential. It includes established industries like automobiles and auto components, chemicals, food processing, leather, textiles, and garments.
The traditional strengths?
Right. But it also encompasses modern and strategically important sectors like aviation, biotechnology, defense manufacturing, electronic systems, IT and BPM, pharmaceuticals, railways, renewable energy, and even tourism and wellness.
Wow, that's comprehensive.
It really is. The source notes that detailed info on all 25 sectors is available on the official website, makeingindia.com.
Okay, so that list covers everything from heavy industry and transport to digital tech, health, and more. Beyond just boosting the manufacturing output numbers, what are the broader, maybe more qualitative aims of Make in India?
Yeah, the initiative's ambitions definitely go beyond just hitting output targets. The source emphasizes aims like facilitating significant job creation across the country, which is obviously huge for India.
Crucial.
Fostering a culture of innovation, enhancing skill development among that massive workforce to meet industry needs, and strengthening the protection of intellectual property is presented as a real holistic push for economic modernization.
And the logo, the lion made of gear wheels, what does that symbolize in this context?
The source explains that the logo is designed as a powerful visual. The lion, often symbolizing strength, national pride,
Yeah.
is crafted from gear wheels. This is meant to reflect the absolutely integral role that manufacturing is intended to play, not just in the government's vision for the economy, but in the overall national development of India. It directly links manufacturing to the idea of a strong, dynamic nation.
So is this just a catchy slogan? A marketing campaign? The source seems to suggest it's intended to be more fundamental than that.
It's quite clear on this. The source explicitly states that Make in India is much more than an inspiring and energizing slogan. It represents what the source calls a comprehensive and unprecedented overhaul of India's existing, often seen as outdated processes and policies framework.
An overhaul. That sounds significant.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. This indicates a strategic pivot by the government to fundamentally change the operating environment for businesses. It signals a deeper commitment to systemic reform aimed at making the country a genuinely attractive and, crucially, easy place to manufacture and do business.
That emphasis on overhauling processes and policies, that seems like a key insight. It's not just about, putting up billboards. It's about changing the underlying rules of the game.
Precisely.
And the source mentions the government is operating under something called a 6P protocol for project branding success. What's that about?
Yes, the source outlines this 6P protocol. The 6Ps are program, process, plan, partnerships, progress, and policies framework.
Okay.
And the source then shows how some of these Ps directly align with or underpin the key pillars that support the broader Make in India initiative itself.
All right, let's look at those key pillars the source highlights. The first one is new processes.
Right. This pillar connects strongly to that process P in the protocol. It's all about initiating what the source calls new age reforms, specifically designed to facilitate the goals of projects like Make in India. A major driver here is aligning these reforms with the parameters used in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index.
Ah, that famous index.
Exactly. The explicit goal is to aggressively improve India's ranking on that global index, making it demonstrably easier for both domestic and international companies to set up shop and operate.
So, cutting red tape, simplifying regulations, that's a core functional area. What's the second pillar?
New infrastructure. This is presented as absolutely foundational. The government's commitment includes developing these dedicated industrial corridors across the country and building integrated smart cities designed specifically for manufacturing and supporting populations.
Not just roads and ports.
No, it's broader. It encompasses incorporating state-of-the-art technology, robust high-speed communication networks to support modern industry. And this source also notes that this pillar includes support for innovation and research, specifically mentioning improving the infrastructure and speeding up the registration system for intellectual property rights.
Ah, connecting back to IPR.
Yes, a direct link. And the source also mentions, importantly, the critical need to address skilled workforce training alongside developing this physical and digital infrastructure.
Right, you need the people to run the machines and systems.
Absolutely. Building the infrastructure means little without the human capital to utilize it effectively. So developing a skilled workforce is intrinsically linked here. This whole pillar really ties into the Plan P. It's a major part of the strategic plan designed to inspire confidence, empower businesses, and enable manufacturing to thrive. Infrastructure quite literally enables economic activity.
Okay. Pillar 3 is new sectors, which we touched on briefly with that list of 25.
Exactly. This involves the strategic identification of those 25 specific sectors where India believes it has potential or wants to build strength. Providing detailed, accessible information about them, like through that interactive web portal, is part of this pillar. It's about clearly signaling the opportunities and priorities to potential investors.
And the fourth pillar, new mindset. This sounds maybe a bit more intangible, a cultural shift.
It is, but it's presented as a very strategic shift in the government's own approach. The source describes it as the government transitioning its primary role from being perhaps historically a strict regulator of economic activity.
To becoming what?
To becoming a proactive business partner, working collaboratively with industry. This new mindset is encapsulated in several key concepts articulated by the Prime Minister, which the source highlights. Zero defect, zero effect. Minimum government, maximum governance, and Creative India, Innovative India.
Okay, let's unpack zero defect, zero effect. That's a particularly resonant phrase. What does it specifically mean here?
The source gives the interpretation from the PM. It's a dual commitment. Products manufactured in India should have zero defect, meaning they meet high-quality standards comparable to the best globally.
Right, quality control.
And the manufacturing process itself should have zero effect, meaning it minimizes or eliminates negative impacts on the environment. So it links manufacturing excellence directly to both quality and environmental responsibility.
Interesting. That new mindset pillar, shifting from regulator to partner, combined with the new infrastructure, feels deeply connected to that broader Plan P you mentioned. It's like the government's blueprint to inspire confidence and enable industry to set up and succeed.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Now, moving to the other Ps in that 6P protocol, partnerships, for instance. What does that cover?
The partnerships P really underscores the fundamentally collaborative nature of this whole Make in India initiative. The source stresses this isn't just some top-down mandate from a single office.
It takes a village, so to speak.
Exactly. It's built on layers of collaborative effort involving various stakeholders. This includes DIPP as the coordinating backbone, sure, but also actively involves union ministers, secretaries to the government, state governments, which is crucial for implementation on the ground, industry leaders themselves, drawing on their practical experience, and various knowledge partners like research institutions or think tanks.
And they're all involved in actually formulating the strategy.
Yes. The source says they are working together in various forums to debate and formulate an action plan, the aim. Achieving that ambitious target of raising manufacturing's contribution to 25% of GDP by whichever target year, 2020 or 2025.
Okay. Then we have the progress P. This must be where we look for tangible results, actions taken, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This P is all about demonstrating concrete actions and the achievements made so far based on the source's data cutoff, which seems to be mostly around 2016 to 2018, looking at the dates mentioned.
Right.
It highlights specific policy decisions like the significant opening up of key sectors, including strategic areas like railways, defense, insurance, and medical devices, allowing for higher levels of foreign direct investment, FDI.
So actively relaxing those FDI limits in important or previously restricted sectors was a key way to show progress and attract investment.
It was a major signal, yes. The source also mentions specific actions taken to improve the investment climate directly. For example, the government ministry collaborated with the World Bank Group.
Why that collaboration?
It was specifically aimed at identifying areas for process improvement that would align with and boost India's ranking in the World Bank's Doing Business methodology. A very targeted effort.
Okay.
They also set up an investor facilitation cell, IFC, specifically for the Make in India campaign. This cell's role is to provide targeted assistance to investors, helping them navigate regulatory approvals, offering hand-holding support throughout the investment process, and providing aftercare support once they're up and running.
That sounds like a very direct, practical response to that ease of doing business's goal we talked about under the new processes pillar.
It is. And to further streamline things for major investor countries, they even set up dedicated country-specific teams. The source names Japan Plus and Korea Plus as examples.
What do those teams do?
They're explicitly tasked with facilitating and fast-tracking investment proposals coming specifically from Japanese and Korean companies, respectively. The source also broadly lists a range of liberalized regulatory policies enacted across the board to ease investments in business operations.
And actual infrastructure progress on the ground, not just plans.
Yes, the source points to concrete progress in the infrastructure pillar as well. It notes the establishment of 6 distinct industrial corridors across the country. Within these corridors, new industrial cities are being actively developed, designed specifically as manufacturing ecosystems.
Okay.
And the source includes quantitative data on FDI inflows since Make in India launched. It states that as of March 2016, the total FDI received since the initiative began was USD 77 billion, with USD 56 billion of that being equity inflows.
$77 billion in total FDI in, less than 2 years? That's a significant rate of investment flow during that period.
It certainly suggests momentum.
And that zero defect, zero effect idea, it shows up again here under progress.
It does. It's listed as one of the key phrases associated with the campaign, reinforcing its importance as a guiding principle for quality and environmental standards. Then the source moves to provide specific examples of major company investments and announcements that happened around that time, serving as tangible illustrations of this progress.
Okay, which companies does it highlight as examples?
It mentions several. For instance, Micromax, an Indian mobile maker, announced plans for 3 new manufacturing units in different states. Japan committed to setting up a substantial USD 12 billion fund specifically for Make in India-related projects.
A dedicated fund from Japan.
Yes. Global tech company Huawei announced opening an R&D campus in India and planning a manufacturing plant. France's LH Aviation signed an OU to set up a drone manufacturing facility. Foxconn, the huge electronics manufacturer, announced a massive USD $5 billion investment commitment over 5 years, earmarking funds for R&D and semiconductor manufacturing.
Semiconductors, that's strategic.
Very. Samsung stated its intention to manufacture a specific smartphone model, the Z1, in its Indian plant. And General Motors declared a USD $1 billion investment aimed at starting automobile production in India.
Those are really concrete examples. It demonstrates that the initiative, through its policy changes and facilitation, was actively attracting significant global players and investment into the manufacturing sector around that time.
They serve as proof points, yes.
Okay, finally, the last P, policies framework.
Right. This P essentially serves to underline that the wide-ranging reforms implemented by the government, especially those related to redefining processes and opening up new sectors, are all underpinned and reflected in the specific policies announced across various dimensions of the economy. The source characterizes these as New Age reforms.
So it ties it all together.
In a way, yes. This pillar provides the legislative and regulatory foundation for the practical changes we've seen in the other pillars and progress points. And it leads us naturally into the next big question: why India? Based on its inherent characteristics and these policy shifts, why is it being presented as such a compelling investment destination?
Right. The policies framework provides the platform. So building on that, why should investors, both domestic and international, choose India, according to the source? What are the key attractors being presented?
This source dedicates a significant section to outlining these compelling reasons, positioning India as the new investment capital.
Let's delve into those. What's highlighted regarding India's human capital? That seems like a big one.
It's presented as a major asset. India possesses this truly massive working-age population. The source cites a figure of 767 million people between the ages of 50 and 64.
Just huge number.
Enormous. It's also highlighted as one of the youngest countries globally, with a remarkably low mean age of just 29 years. And furthermore, the source projects a 100% literacy level by the year 2025.
A gigantic, young, and increasingly educated workforce. That's an incredibly powerful combination, isn't it? Both for manufacturing sectors needing labor and as a potential consumer market.
Absolutely. It represents not just a vast pool of potential employees, but also a rapidly growing consumer base with presumably increasing purchasing power.
And speaking of consumers, what does the source say about the sheer size of the Indian market and the economy itself?
Yeah, it points to a huge and expanding consumer market. It cites a report projecting the market base reaching a staggering U.S. $3.6 trillion by 2020.
3.6 trillion.
And in terms of the overall economy, India is ranked as the third largest globally when measured by purchasing power parity, PPP. The source puts its size at U.S. $8.6 trillion around that time, with projections suggesting it could rise significantly, maybe to U.S. $220 trillion by 2025.
These are truly eye-watering figures, just immense scale and potential.
They certainly are. The source also emphasizes India's growth trajectory at the time, noting it was the fastest-growing major economy in the world with a rate of 7.6% in the fiscal year 2015-16. It even quotes an estimate from the Economic Times identifying an immediate investment opportunity in the order of $1 trillion.
A $1 trillion immediate opportunity that definitely grabs attention. Is there mention of financial stability to sort of underpin this growth and investment potential?
Yes. The source notes that India receives stable or positive credit ratings from major global rating agencies, which signals confidence in its economic management. It also highlights substantial foreign exchange reserves listed at U.S. $371 billion as of September 2016, providing a buffer against external shocks and contributing to financial stability.
Okay, so demographics, market size, growth, stability. We also talked about infrastructure earlier as a new infrastructure pillar for planned development. But the source also lists India's existing infrastructure as a key attractor.
That's right. It's about leveraging the scale that's already there. India already possessed, at the time, the second largest railway network in the world, serving roughly 23 million travelers daily.
Incredible scale.
And it also had the second largest road network globally, extending over 3.3 million kilometers. Plus, extensive coastal and port connectivity, with 12 major ports and around 200 notified minor or intermediate ports along its vast coastline.
So the argument is that the foundation, the sheer scale of a network, is already in place. That provides a starting point for logistics and connectivity for manufacturers, even before all the new infrastructure projects fully come online.
Exactly. It's presented as a combination, existing scale that facilitates operations right now, and the planned next-generation infrastructure that promises greater efficiency and connectivity for the future.
Which neatly brings us to taking a more detailed look at that very next generation infrastructure and the accompanying policy reforms. These seem key to attracting manufacturers under the Make in India framework.
Precisely. The source does delve deeper into the specific areas of planned infrastructure development and the policy changes designed to create that new age investment capital environment we talked about.
What are some of the flagship infrastructure initiatives mentioned in this deeper dive?
The source highlights several key ones. For instance, the launch of the Startup India initiative. This was aimed squarely at fostering entrepreneurship and promoting innovation across the country.
Right, nurturing new ideas.
And this ties directly into that creative India, innovative India mindset we discussed earlier, emphasizing a culture of creation and new ventures.
And more detail on those industrial corridors you mentioned.
Yes, it reiterates the commitment to developing 6 major industrial corridors and establishing 21 new nodal industrial cities within them. A prominent example given is the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, or DMIC.
That one got a lot of attention.
It's a truly massive project, planned with a budget around USD 100 billion, receiving both financial and technical help from Japan, and spanning 1,483 kilometers between 2 major economic hubs. Just huge scale.
What makes these planned cities within the corridors supposedly so attractive for manufacturers? What are the specific advantages listed?
The source lists several key features. They're designed around acquiring large land parcels suitable for big factories and associated facilities. They're planned communities intended to provide supporting infrastructure for the people who live and work there. They're envisioned as ICT-enabled, incorporating modern communication and data infrastructure from the ground up. They prioritize sustainable living principles, and they promise excellent connectivity through planned road and rail networks integrated with the corridor's overall logistics plan.
So deliberately engineered ecosystems designed specifically for manufacturing.
That's the idea.
Beyond these dedicated corridors, are there broader national connectivity projects mentioned?
Yes, the source mentions significant investment and targets in other transport areas too. For roads, there was a target of actually doubling the national road network by 2020.
Doubling it? Wow.
Ambitious, yes. Various railway projects were underway, modernizing rolling stock, building new stations, exploring high-speed rail lines, and importantly for industry, improving connectivity between key ports and mining regions for more efficient freight movement.
And what about coastal and port infrastructure, waterways?
There's the Sagarmala project mentioned, with a project outlay of US $10 billion. This is specifically aimed at modernizing India's ports and developing its inland waterways for transport, which could significantly enhance logistics efficiency, especially for bulk goods.
Right.
The source also mentions the Smart Cities mission, progressing with an outlay of US $7.69 billion. While broader than just manufacturing, it impacts urban infrastructure, services, and quality of life in areas that could support industrial hubs.
Even aviation gets a specific mention.
Yes, the aviation industry had a stated target of becoming the 3rd largest globally by 2030. This reflects a continued focus on improving air connectivity, which is important for both passengers and potentially high-value, time-sensitive cargo.
Okay, that's a massive push across pretty much all modes of transport and urban planning. Now let's revisit that crucial redefining processes pillar. This gets into the nitty-gritty of the ease of doing business reforms.
Yeah, and this area is absolutely critical for attracting manufacturing investment. Complex bureaucracy, long delays, these are major deterrents anywhere in the world. The source describes a holistic ideology guiding these changes towards achieving that Vision 2020, emphasizing a focus on simplifying processes across all government interfaces businesses interact with.
What are some specific, concrete examples of these ease of doing business reforms highlighted in the source, the kind of changes that businesses would actually feel on the ground?
There are several really illustrative examples provided, showing significant reductions in time or complexity. For instance, the time needed to incorporate a company was reportedly cut drastically from around 10 days down to just 1 day.
1 day? That's fast.
Yeah. Getting a power connection, often a major hurdle for new factories, was streamlined to a mandated time frame of within 15 days. That's a huge improvement from a previous potential wait time of up to 180 days.
It's a massive difference.
And the number of documents required for basic export and import transactions, another common pain point, was reduced significantly, from 11 down to just 3.
Those are incredibly impactful reductions for businesses just trying to navigate setting up and trading. What other major policy reforms are noted in this area?
The validity of industrial licenses was extended from 3 years to 7 years. That provides longer-term certainty for planned projects. A new bankruptcy code was enacted in 2015, designed to simplify things and provide a time-bound process for resolving insolvency. It was expected to be fully operational by 2017.
Okay, that helps manage risk.
And the source also highlights the impending implementation at that time of the Goods and Services Tax, the GST. This was envisioned as a single, unifying tax framework, aiming for an April 2017 rollout.
GST was certainly a landmark reform aimed at integrating the entire domestic market, a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. The source also notes that permanent residency status for foreign investors was introduced, offering a 10-year duration. This provides a greater sense of stability for long-term investors and their key personnel living and working in India.
Interesting. Any other examples?
Yeah, other reforms mentioned include the move to online portals for employee-related registrations and payments, like for Social Security, eSIC, and EPFO, and establishing online application processes for environmental and forest clearances, all aimed at digitizing and streamlining those bureaucratic interactions.
Okay, all these points really illustrate a clear, concerted effort to dismantle regulatory hurdles and just make the operational environment much, much smoother for businesses.
That's the clear intention presented.
Now, related to the new sector's pillar in attracting investment, the source details major FDI reforms, foreign direct investment.
Yes, and the source explicitly recognizes FDI as a potential game changer for the Indian economy. It goes into quite significant detail here, providing a substantial list of changes to FDI limits across a wide range of key sectors. This really demonstrates a clear policy direction towards greater openness to foreign capital.
Let's look at some of those significant FDI limit changes detailed in the source. What sectors saw major shifts?
Certainly. In the defense sector, for example, FDI was permitted up to 49% under the automatic route, meaning less red tape. Investments above 49% required approval via the government route, but the door was opened wider.
Okay. What about civil aviation?
For civil aviation, greenfield projects' new ventures could receive 100% FDI automatically. For brownfield projects investing in existing ones, 74% was allowed automatically, with the government approval needed beyond that 74% mark.
What about media and broadcasting, often sensitive areas?
Yeah, they saw substantial liberalization too. Broadcasting carriage services and downlinking of news channels were opened up to 100% FDI. Cable networks also got a 100% FDI limit. For news channels focusing specifically on current affairs, the FDI limit was set at 49%.
And banking, another key sector.
Banking allowed FDI up to 74%. The first 49% was permitted under the automatic route, with the remaining portion needing government approval. And railways vital for infrastructure was opened up to 100% FDI under the automatic route, specifically for things like construction, operation, and maintenance of railway infrastructure projects. That was a significant shift.
Wow, have 100% automatic in rail infrastructure construction. That's a major opening for investment in core infrastructure. What about construction development itself and related areas?
The construction development sector was permitted 100% FDI under the automatic route. And crucially, the source notes that minimum floor area requirements and minimum capital requirements, which previously restricted the types of projects eligible for FDI, were removed. This made the sector much more accessible to a wider range of investors and project sizes.
Any changes noted in the pharmaceutical sector? That's a big one for India.
Yes. For greenfield pharmaceutical projects building new facilities, 100% FDI was allowed under the automatic route. For brownfield pharma, investing in existing Indian companies, FDI up to 74% was automatic, with government approval needed for investments going up to 100%.
Okay. Agriculture and related activity.
Plantation activities covering things like coffee, rubber, cardamom, palm oil trees, olive oil trees were open to 100% FDI automatically. And for certain allied agriculture activities like animal husbandry, including dog breeding, pisciculture, fish farming, aquaculture, and apiculture, beekeeping, the previous requirement of operating under controlled conditions for FDI eligibility was waived off.
Simplifying things there too.
Seems so, yes. A move to simplify conditions for investment in those specific subsectors.
What about the telecom and insurance sectors? Always big areas for FDI discussion.
In telecom, FDI was permitted up to 100%, with the first 49% allowed under the automatic route. Insurance and pension sectors got a new, higher sectoral cap of 49% for foreign investment, with up to 26% allowed under the automatic route.
And manufacturing of medical devices.
For the manufacturing of medical devices specifically, 100% FDI was permitted under the automatic route.
Finally, the rapidly evolving e-commerce sector. How did the FDI policy address that, according to the source?
The source makes a distinction between B2B and B2C models. For business-to-business, B2B, e-commerce, 100% FDI was allowed. For business-to-consumer B2C e-commerce, operating through single-brand retail trading entities, 100% FDI was permitted. But it had a split. 49% was allowed under the automatic route, while investments beyond that needed government approval and were subject to local sourcing norms.
Ah, the sourcing norms caveat.
Yes. Duty-free shops located in customs-bonded areas were also opened up to 100% FDI under the automatic route.
And general retail beyond just single-brand B2C.
The source notes a general retail provision allowing 100% FDI, with 49% via the automatic route. It also highlights that those sourcing norms could potentially be relaxed for cases involving state-of-art or cutting-edge technology, but that was subject to specific government approval.
Okay. Looking at that really comprehensive list, the insight seems clear. The government undertook a major, widespread liberalization of FDI rules across a huge swath of the economy around this time. It signals a fundamental trust, or perhaps a calculated bet on foreign capital as a driver of growth, and a willingness to integrate much more deeply with global business.
That level of broad opening across so many sectors was indeed a significant policy shift. And the source also mentions another tool created to help facilitate trade information, the launch of the Indian Trade Portal by the Department of Commerce.
What was the purpose of that portal?
It's designed to be a single, comprehensive source of information for businesses and investors, specifically regarding non-tariff measures, things like technical standards, regulations, conformity assessment procedures, sanitary phytosanitary measures, all the stuff that can impact trade beyond just tariffs. The aim was to add transparency and predictability for potential investors navigating that complex regulatory landscape.
Makes sense. All these reforms, easing business processes, liberalizing FDI, building infrastructure, are clearly designed to make India a more attractive destination for global manufacturers and investors. Now, another crucial piece of that puzzle, which the source highlights significantly, is intellectual property rights, or IPR.
Yes, IPR is absolutely critical in this context. If you want to attract innovation, high-value manufacturing, companies investing heavily in R&D and advanced production processes, you need robust IPR systems. Protecting creativity, encouraging innovation, it's vital. The source emphasizes that strengthening the IPR ecosystem was seen as essential for the success of the Make in India initiative.
And India actually adopted a specific national IPR policy in 2016 to address this directly.
Yes, the national IPR policy was formally adopted on May 12, 2016. The source describes it not just as a policy document, but as a vision document.
A vision document. How so?
Its aims are quite multifaceted. It wants to create synergy and coordination between the different forms of IP, patents, trademarks, copyrights, the relevant laws governing them, and the government agencies responsible for administering them. It establishes a clear institutional mechanism for implementing the policy, monitoring it, reviewing it, with the goal of incorporating and adapting global best practices to suit India's specific context.
The source mentions this policy wasn't just drafted in some back room. There was extensive consultation involved.
It does. It highlights that the formulation process included wide-ranging consultations with nearly 300 stakeholders. This involved individuals, various government departments, and significantly, representatives from foreign governments, too. That indicates a broad effort to gather perspectives and maybe align with international expectations.
And what's the overarching vision statement for this policy? What's the big picture goal?
The vision statement is quite punchy. Creative India, innovative India.
Okay.
The core idea articulated in the source is to foster an environment in India where intellectual property serves as a powerful stimulus for creativity and innovation, not just in science and tech, but across arts and culture, and even in harnessing traditional knowledge and biodiversity resources. It frames knowledge as the key driver of development, aiming to transform knowledge that is owned into knowledge that is shared for broader societal benefit.
And the mission statement adds perhaps a layer of balance to that vision.
Yes, exactly. The mission is to stimulate a dynamic, vibrant, and critically a balanced IPR system in India. It has this deliberate dual focus. On one hand, yes, foster creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, thereby promoting socioeconomic and cultural development. But on the other hand, simultaneously enhance access to vital areas like healthcare, food security, and environmental protection. It explicitly seeks to balance the interests of IP rights holders with those broader public interest needs and developmental goals.
That balance is often the really challenging part of IPR policy globally, isn't it?
It certainly is.
The source also outlines 7 specific objectives within this policy. What are they?
These 7 objectives basically serve as the strategic pillars for actually implementing the policy. They are: 1. IPR awareness, outreach, and promotion, essentially educating the public and stakeholders about the benefits and importance of IPR. 2. Generation of IPRs implementing measures to actively stimulate the creation of new intellectual property. 3. Legal and legislative framework, ensuring India's IPR laws are strong, effective, but also balanced. 4. Administration and management, modernizing, strengthening, and making India's IPR offices more service-oriented and efficient. 5. Commercialization of IPR, focusing on helping creators and businesses actually get value from their IPs through commercial means. 6. Enforcement and adjudication, strengthening the mechanisms for combating IP infringement and resolving disputes. And 7. Human capital development, building the necessary skills and institutional capacity for teaching, training, research, and skill building in the field of IPR itself.
That's a very structured approach. It covers the entire life cycle of intellectual property, doesn't it? From creation right through to enforcement, and even building expertise in the field.
It aims to be comprehensive, yes.
The source also quickly lists the various types of IPR recognized under Indian law at that time. Can you remind us what those are?
Briefly, the types mentioned include patents for new, inventive products or processes with industrial application, designs protecting the visual appearance of an article, trademarks distinguishing goods and services graphically, could be words, logos, shapes, even sounds, geographical indications protecting goods linked to a specific origin known for quality or reputation, like Darjeeling tea, copyright protecting original works like literary, dramatic, musical, artistic creations, semiconductor integrated circuits layout design protected under its own specific act, and plant variety protection, providing rights for breeders of new plant varieties while also recognizing farmers' rights.
Okay, a broad range covering different types of innovation and creation. And who is tasked with the practical implementation and coordination of this whole policy?
The source mentions the Cell for IPR Promotion Management, or CPAM. This body was set up under DIPP guidelines, operating with a professional structure. It serves as a single point of reference and coordination for driving the implementation of the policy's objectives across the board.
Okay, so we have the overall trade strategy blending different approaches, the big Make in India initiative with its pillars, and that 6P protocol, the reasons presented for why India should be attractive, and then these specific detailed policy reforms in infrastructure, ease of business, FDI, and now IPR. The big question is, did this translate into demonstrable progress according to the source's time frame? The document lists some achievements so far.
It does. And these achievements provide concrete examples of how the policies and strategies we've been discussing were, according to the source, translating into action and results. They directly align with the objectives of the IPR policy we just discussed and also fit under that progress P of the Make in India protocol.
Okay, give us an example of institutional progress mentioned.
Under strengthening of institutional mechanism, the source highlights a significant step: transferring the administration of the Copyright Act and the Semiconductor Integrated Circuits Layout Design Act over to DIPP.
Why is that significant?
Because it brings these crucial IP areas under the same administrative umbrella as patents and trademarks. This allows for a more integrated, synergistic approach across the different IP offices and laws. Additionally, the Copyright Board was merged with the Intellectual Property Appellate Board, IPDA, consolidating the appeal mechanisms. This directly supports that objective 4. Administration and management.
Right, streamlining the bureaucracy. Now, a common challenge globally for IP offices is the sheer backlog of applications waiting to be processed. Was there progress noted here?
Yes, this is highlighted as a major achievement, a drastic reduction in pendency in IP applications. The source specifically notes a significant cut in the number of patent applications awaiting examination. Furthermore, the process for issuing patent and trademark certificates was automated, with certificates being issued electronically, which speeds things up considerably.
Any specific targets mentioned for processing times?
Yes, the source provides some really ambitious targets mentioned at the time. For patents, the aim was to get examination done within 18 months, down from a previous average of around 7 years by March 2018. For trademarks, the target was examination within just 1 month, down from 13 months by March 2017.
Those are incredibly aggressive targets for improving processing speed. Shows real intent.
What about the volume of IP activity itself? Were more people filing?
The source points to an increase in filings. According to the data presented within its time frame, patent filings saw an increase of nearly 7%, and trademark filings experienced a significant jump of nearly 28%.
28% increase in trademark filings. Yeah. This indicates increased activity in generating and seeking protection for intellectual property, which aligns with Objective 2. generation of IPRs, and probably also reflects the improved efficiency noted under Objective 4, administration. Now, it's worth noting, while the numbers show more filings, the source doesn't really delve into the quality or the commercial value of the IP being generated, but the volume itself was increasing.
That's a fair point to consider. Volume is one metric, potential value is another. What about making the application processes themselves more user-friendly? Any progress there?
Yes, the source mentions IP process reengineering. Specifically, the patent rules from 2003 were amended. These amendments were designed to streamline the application and examination processes, aiming to make them simpler and more user-friendly for applicants. This supports both Objective 3, legal framework, and Objective 4, administration.
And what about that objective on increasing awareness? Were they actively educating people about IPR?
Creating IPR awareness is listed as a concrete achievement. Programs were conducted in over 200 academic institutions across India, including reaching rural schools via satellite communication. Targeted awareness initiatives were also held for industry associations, police and customs officials who are key for enforcement, and members of the judiciary. This directly addresses Objective 1, awareness, outreach, and promotion.
They're even integrating IPR into the school curriculum.
Yes, as a tangible step towards Objective 7. Human capital development, content related to IPRs, was included in the NCERT curriculum for the commerce stream at the school level. The idea is to build a foundational understanding of IP among students early on.
And collaborations with international IP bodies. Anything noted there?
The source notes the establishment of Technology and Innovation Support Centers, or TISCs. 6 such centers were established in various institutions across different states, working in conjunction with the World Intellectual Property Organization, WPO. These centers aim to provide innovators and researchers with access to patent databases, technical literature, essentially supporting both Objective 7, human capital, and perhaps Objective 2, generation, by facilitating research.
Okay. A key international benchmark for innovation that often gets cited is the Global Innovation Index, the GII. How did India's standing change, according to the source, during this period?
This is presented as a really significant measure of overall progress. India's rank in the Global Innovation Index report, which is jointly published by WIPO and others, improves substantially. The source highlights a jump from 81st place globally in 2015 up to 57th place in 2018.
81st to 57th in 3 years. That's quite a leap.
It is a notable climb, and it reflects the potential impact of multiple policy initiatives working together: the IPR reforms, efforts to support innovation generally, improvements in the ease of doing business environment. It's seen as a strong external validation of positive momentum in the country's innovation ecosystem at that time.
That jump does seem striking and suggests a meaningful improvement in the factors measured by the GII. Finally, any specific achievements noted regarding the enforcement of IPR?
Under the IPR enforcement section, the source mentions the preparation of an IPR enforcement toolkit. This resource was designed specifically to assist police officials across the country in dealing more effectively with IP crimes, focusing particularly on tackling trademark counterfeiting and copyright piracy. This is presented as a practical step aimed at strengthening Objective 6, enforcement and adjudication.
Okay, so pulling all of this together then, based on the source material we've been discussing, we really see a picture of a comprehensive, deliberate, and quite multifaceted strategy unfolding in India during this period.
It certainly does paint that picture, from the evolution of India's trade strategy post-1991, consciously blending those export-led and growth-led approaches to try and suit its unique context to the launch of that ambitious Make in India initiative, with its structured 6P protocol and its 4 key pillars, focusing on new processes, new infrastructure, new sectors, and fostering that new mindset. The entire effort seems aimed at fundamentally reshaping India's role in the global manufacturing landscape and enhancing its domestic industrial capability.
Yeah, and we've explored the compelling reasons presented in the source for why India should attract investment, leveraging its demographic dividend with that young, huge population, its massive and growing market size, its strong economic growth trajectory reported at the time, and that combination of existing infrastructure scale with ambitious plans for next-generation connectivity and urban development.
Right. And we detailed the specific policy reforms implemented across ease of doing business, the significant liberalization of FDI across numerous strategic sectors, and that focused, structured approach to strengthening the intellectual property rights ecosystem, complete with a national policy and specific objectives.
And the source doesn't just lay out the plans and strategies. It provides tangible examples of reported progress within its time frame, from those dramatically reduced government process times and increased IP filings to that significant jump reported in the Global Innovation Index rank, and even specific examples of major international and domestic company investment announcements tied to the initiative.
It attempts to connect the policy intent to some initial outcomes, yes.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? Well, whether you're tracking global economic trends, maybe evaluating potential international business opportunities, or perhaps you're just curious about how a major developing country like India approaches its complex development challenges and its integration into the global economy. These strategies, policies, and reported achievements illustrate a clear, deliberate effort. It seems to be about more than just, putting out a welcome mat. It's about trying to create an environment through systemic policy overhauls, infrastructure development, and that claimed shift in government mindset that makes manufacturing within India a genuinely viable, attractive, and increasingly predictable proposition.
Yeah, it highlights the strategic intent to leverage India's inherent strengths, its vast market, its population, its diversity, while actively trying to address historical challenges like bureaucracy and infrastructure deficits in order to compete more effectively on a global scale in manufacturing.
Exactly. It's about building the foundation, reforming the system, signaling intent, and hoping the investment and growth follow. And this really leaves us with a question to ponder, doesn't it? Building on this detailed picture painted by the source, which primarily provides data points up to around 2016 to 2018, given the ambitious targets set by Make in India, the foundational policy shifts detailed here, and those initial steps of progress reported during that period, how might these efforts have continued to shape India's position in the global manufacturing landscape and its domestic economic structure in the years since this data was compiled? What stands out to you from this deep dive into India's strategic economic approach during that time?